Remember, You Must Die by Suicide Silence. Sam, this is the Riverside, California Quintet's 7th studio album, arriving March 10th via Century Media Records. Remember, You Must Die consists of 12 tracks, clocks in at around 39 minutes, and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2020's Become the Hunter LP. I mentioned earlier this album releases on Century Media. It's important to note that it's the first record of theirs releasing on Century Media since the Mitch Lucker days, and that the band, in the wake of Mitch's passing, has since been on Nuclear Blast Records with their then new vocalist Eddie at the time from All Shall Perish. And it's now their 4th album with Eddie at the helm as the vocalist. It's crazy because he still feels like a new vocalist and he's not even close. Like he's been with the band forever at this point. Man, and obviously time has been completely obscured, obliterated. Yes. And honestly, reading all of that, one of the biggest things that stands out to me, not the fact that this band's back on Century Media, not the fact that it's their 4th album with Eddie, but the fact that it's been 3 years, and it's a pretty, I'm pretty sure Become the Hunter came out in February of 2020. So it's been 3 literal years since the last Suicide Silence album, which to me is kind of crazy. If you asked me when that album came out yesterday, I would have told you, last February.
Quintessential example of an album that was dead on arrival due to unforeseen circumstances.
Right. Where
it drops right before the pandemic. Every tour around it gets canceled, and it essentially never gets the treatment that it would have otherwise had. Who knows in theory, the Love and Adoration Becoming the Hunter? Become the Hunter would have gotten had it actually been out in front of people. Though I personally, and I can't quite remember how you felt about this album, did not love it.
I remember you did not love it.
I remember I felt that it was a step in the right direction because certainly like a lot of other people, I wasn't incredibly fond of the album prior to that. But
the self-titled, of course.
It felt like trying to find their footing again and just not quite nailing it. And there might be a lot of reasons for that. And I think there are some choices that are made here that were for the better. And it really shows with this record.
Yeah. And we'll get into that right away, obviously. But I did enjoy Become the Hunter. It is not an album that I revisited. And it could be partly due to the fact that it dropped dead in the water in a way, like you mentioned. Just the time of year and the year that it dropped obviously didn't do it any favors, but I do remember liking, for the most part, most of that album. But like you said, it was a band that was continuing to find their footing following a really poor outing with the self-titled. I don't think anyone really enjoyed that album, especially not longtime fans. They may have found a new crop of fans from it. I have yet to meet any of them. And
I think that's hard, though. I think it's hard to do that when you can't tour on that record. You know what I mean?
No. I'm
the album prior,
Suicide Silence.
That is an optimistic hindsight. I truly do not think that record hit anyone.
Yeah, and I'm not trying.
And I feel like the band even acknowledged that. They're like, "Hey, we went out there, we took a swing, we did something different, and it didn't connect."
Right. I'm not dogpiling on the band, and obviously that is a horse that has long since been beaten to death. But I feel like it is a little important to track those 4 albums or those 3 albums with Eddie prior to this newest one, just slightly before the review, because obviously, so You Can't Stop Me, that first one, Eddie, I thought it was actually pretty solid.
Yeah, I was a fan of it as well.
Obviously, the band had all of the pressure in the world, maybe not to deliver, but there were a lot of question marks at the time following Mitch's passing. And I think that they mostly delivered with that album. And then, like you said, they took a bit of a turn with the self-titled and tried some different stylistic things, made some choices maybe not a lot of people were a fan of. And then Become the Hunter was definitely a step back in the direction of the Century Media days. And now we are back on Century Media with an album that very much sounds like in older Suicide Silence, and maybe not quite the Mitch days, but definitely that "you can't stop me" era of Suicide Silence.
And I think a lot of it is intentional. So
yeah, I think there was a lot of reading the room on this album.
Yes, it feels like the last album had to happen so that you could fall back into the good graces of the oldest members of your fan base, right?
Yep.
And then this is the album that actually really capitalizes on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things that stand out to me about this album the most, let's start with Eddie, who I'm a little hot and cold with him as a vocalist. I think I'm right there with you. I think that overall he suits the band well, but his style isn't my ideal deathcore screaming vocalist. His voice is a little hoarse in a way, and I think that sometimes it feels like, and this might be per the production, not so much an issue with it, but a choice, he's struggling to be heard over the instrumentation in a way that's a little frustrating.
Yeah, I'm not professionally in tune enough with like what good production is and what bad production is, but I will say that I don't exactly care for the production from a personal preference for this album. I think that there's stuff like you mentioned with like Eddie kind of coming in a little lower than maybe you would like, and the instrumentals coming in a little higher could very well have been intentional, but I think at times for me it does take away from the overall project. But what I will say is that I do like this project. This is something I want to make clear.
So the producer was Taylor Young, and the pull quote from the marketing material on this was that this was a no bullshit recording infused with honesty. And I think I do get a sense of that, where it feels like there's very little polish on this, right? And that's the intention, so that it sounds kind of raw and nasty. And I think that benefits some aspects, like the instrumentation, and it's a negative for others, like I think Eddie's vocals.
Yeah, I think you take the you have to acknowledge that there are pros and cons with something like that, and you take the pros with the cons. And speaking as a fan of that same bullshit that maybe we write off, like maybe that polish. Yeah, this one's definitely a bit more of a challenge to get through, but overall it's not terrible, I guess.
You're saying the album in its entirety, or specifically Eddie's vocals?
All of it, kind of how it comes together from a production standpoint.
Something I think that really works are the riffs in here. Like guitarist Chris Garza and Mark Halem, they literally steal the show. And on songs like God Be Damned and The Third Death, like they're on fire. It sounds fucking phenomenal.
Closing track Full Void with that like riff that it kind of closes out on for like the last minute or two. I think it's really good.
As a whole, if you're going to this just looking for like the things that satisfy like a metalhead's appetite, I think this kind of has them in spades. Like,
yeah, I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah, like there's a lot of sort of gratifying aspects of it. I also think that Ernie Iniguez, the drummer who's been with the band since Become the Hunter, really knocks it out of the park too. There was a pull quote that said he approached the album as a fan, and I feel like I hear that because the breakdowns in here can be kind of fun. Like the overall, like the rhythm section is pretty fun.
I think that one's more of a, I remember reading that same quote, and I think it's more that in general, Ernie has approached the band and his role within it as a fan.
But this feels like I feel this a lot more with this album than I did the last album.
Right, yeah, like I don't know how
it doesn't feel like it's stuck out with the last album. You're right, and they could have brought him in for the recording process, but I don't know if he actually wrote the
But yeah, no, right now there's definitely I think that there is very much a rejuvenated Suicide Silence somewhere within this album, and it definitely shows itself in someone like Ernie's drumming, Definitely in all the riffage, and for what it's worth, like Eddie's got some really cool moments vocally too. Like what I won't take away is that like while specifically those vocals may not always be my style, there's definitely some great vocal moments all throughout this album. There as a whole might not be my favorite vocalist out there, but like credit where credit is due, like there's some definite talent there somewhere.
What do you think of the overall theme of the record, which is essentially the title, Remember You Must Die, which is spoken aloud in the intro, and kind of ties in with the band's overall like ideology heading into this record, that the life is short, make the most of it.
Very aware of their own mortality.
Remember you must die, as in remember to live, right? And it's very much like a reflection of like what this band has had to go through, especially seeing someone like Mitch pass away at like such a young age. I think that the core themes of this record are almost the strongest aspect of it to me, because I feel like it really speaks to not only the band, but it works so well as a template for an overall deathcore record.
Yeah, it's sort of like the perfect messaging to build a deathcore album around, because obviously making a death-centric album in a genre called deathcore, the great album writes itself pretty much, almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Tying in the intro and outro too is something that I always adore, and they do it really well on this record as well.
Yep. Some nice, like, some spoken word, something from some clip they pulled, I'm sure.
Right. Speaking directly again to the themes of the record.
Also, I do love the title of this one. And I was having like fun earlier with, when we first announced that we were reviewing this, Remember You Must Die. Like, I just love saying this album title. It's just a really great feeling. Obviously, with all that in mind too, like I remember Polyphia last year definitely had the same album title. I forget.
Remember You Will Die.
Yeah,
so
remember
yes.
that You Will Die.
Yes, essentially the same thing spun a little differently. For me, this feels like easily the best Suicide Silence album since the first one with Eddie. And I don't think it's that much of a pull to say that. Obviously, that self-titled record was a hard swing and a miss. For me, that would be like a 0.5 star out of 5.
Yeah, and then Become the Hunter was a couple of hits, couple of misses. For the most part, I think that we're hitting a lot more than we are missing on this new one. There's a couple of misses for me. I think there was the track Endless, like Dark, that didn't really quite it just didn't quite hit for me.
I think if anything, some of the tracks might sort of blend into the entirety of the record and don't really stand out as well. Like singles are strong, opener closer very strong, The Third Death incredibly strong. Mm-hmm. And then there's a couple extra tracks in there that don't really bring or take away from the overall.
Altar of Self is another nice one too. I think that was another single.
I think that might have been maybe the first single for the album. Yeah.
And then obviously like Capable of Violence, one of the singles, is really great.
Another interesting aspect of this is that I feel like Suicide Silence are significantly more compelling with a visual element.
Yeah.
Experiencing these songs made me want to rewatch the videos because I remember how enjoyable those were at the time.
There's another really good example for this right now. Another funny band, but I'm forgetting who. That I know. I'm not really giving you a lot to work with there,
right.
But yeah, like there were definitely parts where I'm just like, man, I remember this song hitting a lot more in video form, and I almost want to just pull that up alongside this and then enjoy it to its full extent like I did in the past. Which I don't know, it's rarer in this scene because I think that there's so many throwaway videos that come out when you have a band that constantly hits on their videos.
Yeah, and I think in this album cycle in particular, they really knocked it out of the park. Is it NFW and Altar of Self are absolutely fucking phenomenal.
The videos, yeah. NFW had the fucking
the band being
they were playing like an arm or something.
Right, precisely. Like they murdered angry
Someone was beheaded and they were like
I'm
singing
trying to
the
remember
last
exactly
bit.
what the concept of it. Where it was like a guy was getting picked on, and then like Suicide Silence shows up and is like, "Don't you make fun of sea
Oh, they
kids?" and
picked
like
back.
murdered every single one
Right.
of them. Yeah. I think I would give this like I would give this for an SOTS score a 3 out of 5.
I'm slightly more positive on it. I from a score standpoint, I think I'm going to give it a 3.5.
Okay.
Out of 5.
Strong. So we're about the same, where we feel generally pretty good about this, and can recommend it when it drops the coming Friday when you're hearing this.
Yeah, on Century Media.
The Breakdown.